Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Omnipod, simplify life with Omnipod 5, by Dexcom G7, the most accurate CGM system, and by EdgePark. Simplify your diabetes journey with EdgePark.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, it's one thing to push yourself when you live with type 1 diabetes, thinking of extreme athletes in these unbelievable conditions. But it's another thing when others rely on you for their safety. Sarah Janin is an outdoor adventure guide for sports like rock climbing and ice climbing and avalanche education.
Nobody has ever said that they're uncomfortable, but there's always questions, especially, I would say, mostly with doctors, doctor clients that I have of like, wow, I need to tell my clients about you. How do you manage this? Like, this is amazing that you're out here and doing this, because they are just in disbelief.
Sarah was diagnosed with type 1 as a toddler in a time before meters, let alone CGMs, and she's incredibly honest about her struggles. She's thriving with diabetes now, and she shares what she does to keep herself and her clients safe in the outdoors that she absolutely loves. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am always so glad to have you here. You know, we educate and inspire with a focus on people who use insulin, and I'm always excited to tape the show, but I'm having a great time today. This was just one of those really good diabetes days, and no, I haven't talked to Benny. My son is away at college, and I hate to say this doesn't have a lot to do with him. I had a meetup today with my diabetes mom group here in Charlotte. We do monthly meetups. I've been doing this for years. We do lunch one month, we do dinner the next month. And I stopped over the summer, rarely have meetups in July and August. So this was our first one back. It was a small group, but there was a mom who had never been with us before. Her son was diagnosed around Christmas time last year. And man, she's doing great. But she had a lot of questions. It was just a wonderful meetup. And it reminds me of why I do this. So even after all this time, my son, if you're new, was diagnosed almost 17 years ago now. And I still need my moms. So to that, you know what I'm going to say next. Really quickly, though, Mom's Night Out, registration continues. We have 2 cities coming up really quickly. Frisco, Dallas in Texas. That is October 13th and 14th. Providence, Rhode Island, October 27th and 28th. We're back in Charlotte in February, but registration is open still for all of those cities. So if you're thinking of coming to the one in Dallas, I need a head count really soon, guys. So jump on in. And I'm so excited to meet everybody. I've been emailing with the moms that are already registered. I cannot wait to meet everyone. It's going to be a blast. And we're going to be announcing next year's cities really soon. Okay, my guest this week is an adventurer in spirit, for sure, and in real life as well. She is a full-time mountain guide in Colorado, and she is going through the training and the education to become an international mountain guide. She has big goals. You'll hear much more about that during the interview. I'm often asked, how do you find guests for the show? And a lot of times I'll see somebody that I think is interesting. I'll reach out. A lot of times, PR companies will contact me. I get a lot of messages. I get a lot of DMs, Instagram, Facebook, that are frankly a lot of garbage. I mean, there's a lot of creeps out there. But I also get a lot of pitches that make no sense for this show. Not only are they a different type of diabetes, but they're snake oil, they're garbage. But I keep all the messages open because, hey, you never know. And that's exactly what happened here. Sarah contacted me because she found the show. She was on a 22-hour road trip and she started binging it, which was amazing to hear. So of course I had to have her on once I learned a little bit about her. She is honest, she's enthusiastic, and she is passionate about what she does. And that is next. One of the most frustrating parts of mealtime insulin can be the need to pre-bolus. I've seen my son forget to do it or hesitate because he's not confident about meal timing in a restaurant or when he's out. Afrezza is unique because it is the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin available. Once you breathe Afrezza into your lungs using the inhaler, insulin appears in your bloodstream in less than 1 minute, and it may start reducing blood sugar in about 12 minutes. Afrezza allows you to inhale your insulin right when food arrives, even unexpectedly, so you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more, see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium. It is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to talk to you.
I am so excited to be here, so thank you so much.
You got it. Let me start by asking you, what are you up to these days? Tell me a little bit about your career, your guiding. What are you doing this time of year?
Well, it's kind of funny that you asked that because I have a day off due to the rain. And so I have a mellow day of adulting, and I went to the climbing gym this morning, and now I'm able to make time to actually chat with you. And so what am I doing is full-time guiding, rock guiding, alpine guiding. I'm in on the track for the American Mountain Guide Association to get my certifications. And so that keeps me extremely busy this time of season.
I'm going to be full of dumb questions today. When you say you're guiding, what does that mean?
Oh boy. So I'm basically taking people out that are interested in, say, rock climbing. They've never rock climbed outside. Maybe they've done a little bit in the gym and they're interested in experiencing the outdoors of rock climbing. Or maybe they want to experience maybe multi-pitch climbing, which is getting up high on rock climbs in different sections. And so I am the guide that keeps them safe and has all the technical skills to get them to their big objectives and their goals that they want to accomplish.
How did you decide to do something like this?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's funny that you asked that question, only because it wasn't one of those things where at 20 years old, I was like, I'm going to be a mountain guide, where I find a lot of my colleagues, they were like, yep, this was my path. I didn't even go to school. This is what I wanted to do. Whereas I went to school for veterinary technology. And I did that for many years and worked in the ambulance and enjoyed emergency medicine, which got me into working in a career of stem cell therapy. And I just happened to be skinning up Beaver Creek when I ran into the owner of a small mountaineering company in Vail that asked me if I wanted to try out for the ski guide position. And I just thought nothing of it, like, sure, that sounds great. Why don't?
Yeah.
And so eventually that led me into him asking, hey, would you like to ice guide? And me being like, well, I've never ice climbed. And then it was, well, come training with us and we'll get you ice guiding. And then it was like the next summer of, hey, do you want a rock guide? And I was like, oh gosh, you haven't seen me rock climb, have you? And so it kind of ended up somewhat of being grandfathered into this company without any professional true training until one of my mentors came into the company and was like, Sarah, you need to do your single pitch instructor. And that is through the AMGA, the American Mountain Guide Association, which is where I am on the track to becoming an international mountain guide. And I'm getting closer and closer, and it's taken me years to get there. I probably could have had my PhD by now.
I was just going to ask, how long, what's the process? Is it, I would imagine it's a combination of practical, and is there classroom, things like that?
There's a lot involved. I started with my single pitch instructor in 2014. And granted, I was on my way in the medical field to doing other career things. So I wasn't fully committed to guiding. I was kind of more committed and wanting one foot in one door and one foot in the other because I loved it so much that the company that I was working for in the medical field moved me to Boulder. What a dangerous, bad choice that was, because Boulder's like the rock climbing mecca. So I eventually became a rock climbing guide here full time. And I know you had asked me like what that process is. And it's a process that is so involved with not just the AMGA, but ARI, the American Institute for Avalanche Research and Education. And so I have to take these avalanche education courses to actually ski guide. And it's years of training and lots of prerequisites. And I would say resume building before I can even take one of these courses. So there's more than just like, oh, I'm going to sign up for a course and just take it.
I have a million more questions, but before we go any further, I made lots of notes, and we're definitely coming back to avalanche training. But before we go on, let's talk about type 1 diabetes. When were you diagnosed? Tell me that story.
Well, I was diagnosed at age 2. And my dad, who is a type 1 diabetic, he kind of knew right away. And he said, after me asking for water, and peeing in my diaper constantly. Now, this is going to date me, is that he took one of his urine strips that he used to test his blood sugar and put that in my diaper, and the whole thing turned purple. So it was immediate. Yeah. So that is when I was diagnosed at age 2, and he was diagnosed at age 7, and now he's 75.
Oh, that's great.
It's so amazing. It's one of those things. I was not fortunate to be raised by him, because I was raised by my mother. And when they separated, I went with my mom. There's 5 of us. And so I was very much an independent diabetic growing up. And she was kind of still learning, like, how do you take care of a child with diabetes? And so testing wasn't a thing for me. I would go years without testing my blood sugar, to be honest with you, a long time.
Yeah.
And it was probably, as a kid, the one thing I cried over, like, don't prick my finger, like shots. I knew that shots was something I had to have, but the testing was something that I didn't have to have.
That's amazing. So Isn't that amazing to look back and think about now? Because you're not alone. You're not alone. And if you're a newer diagnosed person, or you're a parent of a child who's been newer diagnosed, I know you just fainted. But, back in the day, especially with urine testing and the early meters, I've heard this from a lot of people, that it kind of wasn't, I wouldn't say it wasn't worth it, but it didn't give you a good picture. It didn't seem to have an impact on day to day. I mean, Sarah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're not the first person I've heard that from. It must have been such a different time. It was truly a different time. There wasn't even A1C checking back that I can recall. It's kind of one of those things where I'm surprised I did as well as I did, but I blame it on exercise, that I can be as healthy as I am today, and that my mom never held me back from anything, ever. It's like I hung out with my brothers and sisters and played sports. And that was something that she was like, you have to do sports. You have to. It was one of those to keep our grades up in high school of, okay, it was volleyball, basketball, and softball. That's what we did. So you were super active from a young age.
Absolutely. Yep. I grew up in Ketchikan, Alaska, on a small island. And then we moved to Orcas Island, Washington. And then I came to visit my dad in Colorado, and I called my mom and said, Mom, I'm staying here. She was mortified.
How old were you?
I was 18. Yep. So it was like getting off the island was huge for me. Yep.
I guess this would be more of I hate to say modern question. We're not talking about the Stone Age or anything, but, I have talked to people who live more remotely like that, right, in Alaska or on islands. And I know it's civilization. I know there are cities, but it is a remote way of living in many ways. Did that come up at all when you were a kid with type 1? I love it when I don't have to deal with a faraway mail order system, when I can just pick up diabetes supplies from the pharmacy. Omnipod is the only tubeless full-feature insulin pump available through the pharmacy. It makes it simple to pick up pods and insulin in the same place, and you avoid high startup costs from traditional tubed insulin pumps. You simply pay as you pod. Remember, pharmacy means no commitment, and pharmacy means you can switch now. even if your tubed pump is under warranty. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety, risk information, and free trial terms and conditions, visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Now, back to Sarah answering my question about growing up in a pretty remote community in Alaska.
Absolutely. And it's awesome that you asked that, because I remember my mom signed me up for a YMCA camp when I was like 10 or 11 years old. That was the first time I ever met another diabetic in my life. And not only that, I met like 10 or 12 of them. I remember there were so many. And watching them like inject themselves, because I had never done that. And at 10 years old, I was like blown away by these young kids injecting themselves and watching it, and just like, wow, I feel kind of behind. And I'm sure it had a lot to do with like not being able to grow up with my dad to kind of show me those ways, and my mom just not knowing. But I was so fortunate to go to this camp, because that was a game changer for me.
I bet. And I hear that a lot, right? You're feeling like now I can do it myself. Is that when you started doing more and more for yourself?
I would say that I started learning how to inject, but that was an interesting learn, because I only knew how to inject in one place.
Oh, boy.
Uh-huh. Talk about beef and pork insulin and injecting in one place.
Oh, yeah. And bigger needles, right?
Bigger needles, the insulin. Nowadays you have this lipoma buildup of fat, whereas beef and pork insulin actually put this indent in your muscle.
Ooh.
And so I had this huge indent in my leg, like a good probably 3 inches or so, because that's the only place I knew how to inject, was comfortable with. And so I started to get that in my leg and in my butt, because I would change from only those 2 places till I learned that I had to revolve them. And when synthetic insulin came about, oh man, that was quite a learning curve for me. Whew. And I still wasn't testing. So to have the doctor be like, well, we're still figuring out the transition, so take your insulin dose of what you were taking on beef and pork, and maybe we'll just subtract a unit and try that. Oh man, the ambulance calls.
Really? See, I have to stop you there, and I pardon my ignorance, because I kind of thought I knew what you were alluding to, but I'm not even sure I realized how big a difference it made for people switching from that older insulin to the synthetic. So it was that difficult.
Oh, it was so much stronger. Oh my gosh, it was. I think I remember taking somewhere around almost 10 units of regular was what the beef and pork was. And NPH, I can't even remember back then how many units I took, but I think that was twice a day. And my regular was, no, I only did 2 injections a day, NPH and regular. And then when Humalog came out, that was when I had to learn that even 5 units of insulin, whoo, that was incredible, when I only needed 2. And the learning curve on that was hard. I think I went through a couple boyfriends in that learning.
Oh, God.
To be honest with you.
And I don't want to get too personal. You don't have to answer this kind of stuff. But when you were 18 and moved in with your dad, did you talk about type 1? Because you may not have. I mean, did he kind of share any of his experiences at that time?
The only thing he would really say was, we used to boil our needles back in the day and sharpen them on this, like, it must have been some kind of a knife sharpener.
Oh boy.
And to boil them, to sterilize them, and how dull they were, how he would measure his food on scales back in the day. And there wasn't really carb counting. It was all on weight, and how his parents really struggled with that. But my dad is just one of those people that is so obsessed with his blood sugar. And he has always had under, I want to say, a 6.5 A1C. It's incredible because he's not like that active, and he used to smoke, and his diabetic control is absolutely amazing. And I'm just hoping that just gets passed on to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Because my A1C, with the years that I had not checked my blood sugar, was anywhere from an 8.1 to a 12.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wow.
Mm-hmm. And 8.1, I was like, yes. And now I have a CGM, and that it was a game changer compared to, I mean, I gave an insulin pump a good college try of 7 years, and that did not change my A1C, whereas the CGM, game changer. And now I'm at a 6.8, and the doc's like, just a couple more units down.
I think that's fabulous. You tell your doctor I said so.
Okay.
Do you mind if I ask? So you're using a CGM and you're on multiple daily injections?
I am. Yeah. I changed to injections because of the work that I'm in. The insulin pump was not meant for my active lifestyle. And it might have to do a lot with, because I'm in a harness, because I'm out in the freezing cold. I had my insulin pump freeze on me when I was 6 miles out in the mountains, ice climbing. That was an interesting day, to say the least, of having to try to take the cartridge and push a small amount of insulin into my body and guesstimate
Oh my gosh.
every couple of hours until I got out of the field. And then rock climbing up on a big multi-pitch climb, about 400 feet. My insulin pump came out of my pocket and dropped that 400 feet, and I watched it explode. I said, we have to go now. Because I was about an hour from the top of the climb down, and then an hour back to my car, where I knew I had some leftover insulin in there.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, that's the straw. I got to go back to injections. And I tell you what, the injections have been amazing with the CGM. Absolutely game changer.
When I was doing my research and looking you up, you're listed as a guide, one of these find a provider where people can go and look for guides. And you do disclose, as a fun fact on one of them, that you have type 1, but you do disclose it. Was that important to you?
It has become, I think, because it was so embarrassing to me for many years. I was hush hush. And the only other guide I know with diabetes is kind of where I was, and is very hush hush, to where now I see it as a liability, and almost like I enjoy telling my clients now, like, hey, just FYI, when you hear my phone go beep, 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 it means we get to take a break and have a snack. And they're like, oh, we love snacks.
Has anybody ever said I'm not comfortable, or has asked questions or anything like that?
Nobody has ever said that they're uncomfortable, but there's always questions, especially, I would say, mostly with doctor clients that I have, of like, wow, I need to tell my clients about you. How do you manage this? Like, this is amazing that you're out here and doing this, because they are just in disbelief, which kind of got me into thinking I need to do some kind of a diabetic rock climbing outing. And so that's my next goal, is to like diabetics in the wild.
Really in the wild.
Yes, exactly. And I think the one and only time I really had an issue was after a big long day, multi-pitch guiding in Red Rocks, which is out in Las Vegas. Came back from guiding. My CGM had ripped out and was no longer in there and I couldn't tell what my blood sugar was. And I was actually low, thinking, oh my gosh, I haven't done my insulin injection. Yes. So I was low and I was like, I need an insulin injection. Just decided to do one. I had dropped off my clients. I was ready to have my snack, my time off, and it was too much too soon. And, I ended up hitting the cement ground with my head. They were still in the parking lot. I got up and I hit it again, and they thought for sure my skull had cracked. That's how hard I hit. They called the ambulance, and it was kind of this big ordeal. The woman's husband was a doctor, and he indicated after that incident that I was so out of control that I could no longer go rock climbing with her. And that was, man, that was hard to take. That was a tough one because I was thinking, man, I'm doing so good. I'm doing so well. I wish he could see me before because this is really good now.
Just one thing from that story that I got a little confused, and it may be because you froze here on Zoom, but you started to say like you were low, but you took insulin. You had lost your CGM. You didn't know you were low.
That's correct. Yeah. I just thought because my metabolism, sometimes when I'm guiding, it gets high enough, or my metabolism is just continuing throughout the day so strong that a lot of times I don't need my noon injection.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what happened that day, whereas I thought, no, I'm due. I need my injection. and I should have finger prick tested, but the ambulance guys that were hilarious. They're like, oh girl, I pricked your finger 5 times and no blood. Your fingers are so calloused from rock climbing.
Wow.
I could not get any blood from you.
How long ago was that?
That must have been 3 years ago.
Okay. And you're doing okay since?
Absolutely. No ambulance call since. Yeah. That's, yeah. No ambulance. I had to think about that one.
All right. What kind of stuff do you like to use to treat lows? What's easy for you to bring with you, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's one of those things like alpine climbing. I'm measuring out the weights of my food, what gear I'm bringing, what kind of excess. And so when I treat my lows, everyone asks me, oh, you must have like a glucagon pen or some kind of special diabetic sugars. And it's like, no, I have shot blocks. I have gels. I have like regular candy. I really like Halloween candy. And so I bring the Snicker bars, the things that are going to be attractive to me to eat out there, because if I like variety, and if I have the one same thing that my mother gave me when I was little, I cannot drink apple juice again because I've had way too much. And those little chalky glucose tabs that are just disgusting, I can't eat those. So I have to constantly kind of re-up my sugars in my pack. Mm-hmm.
And how do you pack your supplies? Like, how do you pack your insulin? How do you pack your pens? I assume it's pens and not syringes.
It is pens. And I'm so glad that you asked, because this is something that I am going to do trials on, because my last AMGA course was out in Washington, Alpine. It was an advanced Alpine guide course. It's 10 days long. I was out there for 18 days. So when I'm in the mountains and the glaciers are receding so badly that I was thinking I could put my insulin pens in that snow, but they were so far receded that my camps weren't even close to the snow.
Wow.
So I had to think of, how am I going to keep my insulin cool for these 18 days? So what ended up happening was my insulin got warm. It got really warm. And by day 18, as I'm driving back to Colorado, I'm injecting and injecting and injecting, and my insulin has become so weak because I didn't bring my heavy MD case that I usually keep my insulin in. And I only bought that because I saw on Instagram some mountaineer holding it up in their arm like this. And I was like, that's the case. It's for EpiPens and insulin pens, and it's heavy. And so alpine guiding, I was like, I'm not going to bring that. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Big mistake. And so then on my way back home, as I'm injecting numerous times a day, I decided to walk into a pharmacy and just be like, hey, I have a question for you. I'm new insurance. I'm out of the state. What would it cost for me to get one insulin pen? Because my insulin has become weak. What would it cost? And she goes, I can't break open the box. I can't give you one pen. And I said, it's going to be over $1,000. And she said, yes, it's going to be over $1,000. And I was like, I have one day left to make it home. I will use my insulin pen.
Yeah, it's so bad. I hear you. Oh, we've been in that situation. They will not break up a pack. They just won't sell you one pen. Let me get back to some of the questions I had when you started talking in the beginning here about training. I don't even know what I want to ask you. I really want to learn more about avalanches, though.
Oh,
I don't ski, so these are not practical, and I don't hike, so these are not really practical questions for me. But anything that you have learned about avalanches that we should know?
Oh, well, take an avalanche education course first and foremost, before heading in the backcountry. And so that's something that I teach a ton of in the winter time. That's kind of my bread and butter. That's my go-to. And I am in the backcountry almost every single day on my split board teaching avalanche education.
Wow.
And speaking of split boarding, I am on a mission to become the first female certified split board guide. And I thought it was in just North America, but it's actually might be the world. And so that's my big goal. And I'm signing up for that course in March.
Is there a misconception or anything? We all know avalanches from the movies, right? But is there anything that you start out by telling people like you think you know, but no?
Well, it's pretty awesome. Living here in Colorado, we have the worst snowpack in probably the world. So it's really easy to teach avalanche education here and to scare a lot of people because it is so fun in that our snowpack, it just stacks up a little bit differently and forms a little bit differently than, say, the West Coast, what we call the maritime snowpack. And so it's one of those things where you need a lot more education on. And the number one thing I try to train people, so this is for you, number one thing is to keep it under 30 degrees. And to keep your angle under 30 degrees is going to prevent you from getting into an avalanche. And a lot of people think, well, 30 degrees is not very steep. Well, I've had some POW shots and face shots on 30 degrees that will make you smile all day long. That's worth it. Yeah. So that's the best advice I can give to people that are uncertain if going in the backcountry.
What's your advice for people with type 1 who want to do all of these adventurous things but are nervous? I mean, you've already alluded to a pretty bad low that you had, and you're the person in charge, right?
Yes.
And I know that was few and far between, but I appreciate you sharing it. But, you know, what do you want people to know who have kids who want to ski or adults who are starting to do these backcountry kind of adventure things? It's here. The all-new Dexcom G7 continuous glucose monitoring system is now available. Powerful and simple, Dexcom G7 is proven to lower A1C and help you spend time in range, all without finger sticks, scanning, or calibrations. There are so many amazing new features to talk about here. I'm not sure where to begin. Dexcom G7 is 60% smaller than the previous generation and is the most accurate CGM system out there. The 30-minute warm-up period is fantastic, and it's up to 2 times faster than any other CGM brand. I love the all-in-one sensor and transmitter. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My conversation with Sarah continues as she is talking about her advice for kids or adults who want to have these kind of adventures.
Yes, there is a group called Riding on Insulin, and I think they're based out of Colorado, and I have actually taught some of their instructors avalanche education, and that was really cool. Granted, they weren't type 1 diabetics, but it got me into thinking like, I need to start this niche kind of thing of bringing people out here that are so nervous. So one of the things that you actually got me into from listening to your podcast was connecting on Facebook to the type 1 diabetes forums, like a couple of them. And I had an introduction of myself, and I can't believe how many people responded to that and how blown away I was to so many questions on that forum that I wanted to go in and answer them all. And one thing in particular that got me was, is this food diabetic friendly? And a person took a picture of a box of rice, and I had to respond. And I said, all food is diabetic friendly. Like I eat all food. And I think that's what just blows people's minds away, is because they do see me eat an ice cream cone here and there. They do see me charge up mountains at full speed. And I used to be in triathlons, and I used to do racing. And, it's just one of those things like, yeah, we still live this normal life. Sure, not right now. I'm not going to eat an ice cream cone because I haven't exercised enough or my metabolism isn't up. But that box of rice is diabetic friendly. Foods are diabetic friendly. Just how much you can eat them, how much insulin you need to take to be able to eat those correctly. And after I read so many of those comments, I was like, oh, I'll be this Facebook troll if I continue. So I was like, I just want to bring people into the wild and show them. And so I had this client. She took an avalanche education course for me. She's an endocrinologist. And I hit her up and I was like, would you be willing to come out if I put this group together to ask you questions? And she was like, absolutely. Let me talk to, my medical providers about a waiver and things like that, so I can give medical advice to these people. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So this is what I'm going to work on in the next couple months, is bringing her in and seeing what we can come up with.
I love it. What a great idea. That's fantastic. And then I guess one of my last questions is just, is there something you want to accomplish that you haven't? And I know you have big plans for guiding more people with diabetes and learning more about control and working with the endo, but I just mean like a place or a guided hike, something like that. I don't know what even I'm not using the right words, but you know what I mean.
Well, I have an ultimate goal, and that is to become an international mountain guide. It's called an IFMGA mountain guide, and to be one of the first maybe 20 female international mountain guides, and maybe the first diabetic one, is the ultimate goal. And that means I can guide in Europe and go ski guide and go like on the Hout route. There's a route is like to be able to actually guide that would be a dream, to go to Chamonix and go be able to guide that terrain, and to go to Italy and go out there and guide some fabulous rock climbs. That is like my ultimate dream. Because right now I'm just only allowed to guide in the US.
Only. I love it. But we'll keep looking. That's amazing. And then I guess my last question here is just, there is such passion in your voice when you talk about this. You've been doing this for a long time. What do you still love about it?
Oh my gosh. And it's something I thought about just recently, actually, was like, is it a good thing that I started later in life? Is it a good thing that at 34 years old, I found rock climbing and was so passionate about it? And I just fell in love so hard with rock climbing that almost my true passion of snowboarding almost went off to the side a little bit. And I look at these younger guides and almost look at them as like, are they burnt out? Are they already burnt out from guiding? And I don't see myself ever getting burnt out. And it might be that I experienced already numerous careers up until this point, that this was the career that I was like, what took you so long to get here? Where I was like, why didn't I find you when I was 20? So I think that in a way I'm kind of fortunate being now at 45. Now is the time I think about, oh, how many years do I have left to be able to guide? How can I keep my injury levels down? How can I keep my diabetes at a really good high-end level without any complications? And so that's my new bigger fear, I would say, is could I guide till 60? And then what happens? There's no 401k, there's no insurance plan, there's very minimal pay. It's all on being passionate about this job that keeps me wanting to continue.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. This was a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your passion and being so honest about everything. And we will definitely keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure. And thank you for having me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
More information about Sarah and a lot of things we talked about, I will link that up in the show notes over at diabetes-connections.com. Click on the episode homepage or just kind of scroll down depending on what app you're listening to. Usually there's more information right underneath the player in Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you are listening. But if you can't find it, come on back to the homepage. Before I let you go, I just want to take a moment and talk about something that comes up this time of year. I get questions from the Jewish community a lot about fasting with type 1 diabetes. Just to explain, we are in the high holidays of the Jewish calendar. Rosh Hashanah started, and the 10 days that start with Rosh Hashanah and end with Yom Kippur are the days of awe. This is a serious time for the Jewish community. It's a time when you're supposed to really think about the last year, what you'd like to do better in the coming year, because this is the Jewish New Year. Fasting, not eating, is an important part of Yom Kippur. For 24 hours, sundown to sundown, many people fast. Fasting is not required. It actually says in the Torah that you should not do it if it puts your health at risk. So no children, pregnant or breastfeeding women, the elderly, and anybody who might make themselves sick by fasting. So for a long time, I would say the vast majority of people with any type of diabetes probably did not. Look, I'm not an expert. I know some of you are already like, Stacy, you got it wrong. I am Jewish. I don't speak for all the Jewish people. I'm not a scholar. But I do want to pass this information along because I promise you, I get emails and questions every year. So can you fast safely if you have diabetes? And the answer is sure. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know that you can do it. It's a question of talking to your endocrinologist, especially with type 1, right? Figuring out what makes sense for you, changing your dosing, working with your insulin pump system, and being prepared to treat lows as you need to. I'm going to link up a couple of things in this episode's show notes, and I'll probably put it on social media as well. I'm going to put some information about fasting with diabetes. I'll also put some carb counts because while we're fasting on Yom Kippur, the breaking of the fast is one of my favorite holidays. Is that a holiday? It's really just a meal. Look, it's one of my favorite things on the Jewish calendar. It's just such a wonderful get-together with friends and family, and the food is usually excellent. Plus, you haven't eaten, so the food is even more excellent. I have a friend who breaks the fast every year with a shot, like an alcohol shot. I didn't grow up with that. I don't think that's the Torah, but it makes it festive. I know this doesn't apply to the vast majority of you listening, but I thought you might be curious about it. All right, thank you as always to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacy Sims. I will see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Life is busy and managing diabetes is a daily commitment. EdgePark can help you say goodbye to the worry of managing your diabetes supplies with a variety of cutting-edge insulin delivery systems from brands like Medtronic and Tandem. Plus, EdgePark accepts most insurance plans and handles the paperwork, so you can simplify your life, your diabetes care, and your budget in one click. Visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the EdgePark logo.